Everybody in, Dana?
Yeah, thanks, Amy.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone, and welcome to the Totality of Partnerships. This, I believe, if my memory serves me correctly, is our third um, workshop, our third webinar on grants and working together and things like that. So we're very excited to keep this series running. Next slide, please, Glenn. That's not changing for me.
No.
No. It looks good though. It looks lovely.
That's right. Okay, beautiful. But this one is also beautiful. I really love looking at this remastered work by um, Dennis Golding, sorry. So just to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land, sky, and waterways on which we're meeting today and pay respect to elders past and present. And to all Indigenous people who may be attending today, I'm on the lands of the Boomerang, and that covers quite a large area of Melbourne, but I'm over in the St Kilda area. And if anyone's over here, there is a beautiful walk for the Yallock Whelan clan that you can do along the bay and see some of the old fishing catchments that they have. So I would encourage people to look out for what they've got on their lands. Thank you, Glenn. And so, of course, we recognise the lived experience within the room today, and we always aim to speak honourably and respectfully about ongoing emotional distress and the experiences of trauma and mental ill health, and of course, the work of caring and experiences of care within this context. Thank you, Glenn. So this slide shows the Alive National Centre values of lived experience, expertise, practice, wisdom, inclusive, authentic, brave, and outcomes driven, as well as the foundations from the 2024 actions to the call. And if you want to find out a bit more, you can find that on the website. Thanks, Glenn, and thanks for everyone for putting where they're from, their lands in the chat. And of course, as always, just a little note on language that may be used today and in the centre. We obviously span many diverse and wide spaces of mental health, mental ill health, distress, suicide, and social and emotional well-being. And so we understand that some might find language or framings is not always what they prefer, and some may experience discomfort from this. As always, we encourage you to take a break, go grab a cup of tea or a coffee, and leave the session if you just need to, and you're always welcome to join later. Thank you, Glenn. Okay, so this is us. So the Next Generation Research Network is hosting today's event, and we provide the opportunity to bring together future mental health research leaders. And you can see the co-leads and, of course, our mentors on the slide here today. So we currently have 289 members across Australia, and you can see some of the events that we run listed on that slide here as well. Thank you, Glenn. Okay, and this is just a very quick note that the funding schemes for the early career researchers and the mid-career researchers and community-based researchers are currently open. You can see the categories on the slide here, but for more information, visit the link. It's on the website, and applications close next month on the 29th. And so this is just a quick notification that following each of our Funding Galaxy question and answers events, we update our co-created guide for researchers who are navigating the mental health research Funding Galaxy. So this will obviously be updated following the event, and shown on the slide are the engagement statistics for this guidebook over the years, and you will be able to find that on the website as well. And so for today's theme, the partnerships in research, we've chosen this because we talk a lot about networking and collaborations and strengthening partnerships. And we talk about this a lot amongst our group, in particular between the Next Generation Research Network and the Lived Experience Research Collective and the Implementation and Translation Network. So it is something that goes across a lot of spaces. You can see some quotes on the slide here about why we've chosen this theme today. And it's just a really important thing for career progression, but also how we look to translate our research into practice by building on, the work of others and also speaking with others and gaining new ideas that way. And this is just a context setting. So types of partnerships can be with universities, other research institutions, industry, government, non-government organisations, community businesses, professional associations and peak bodies, and individuals with particular lived and living experience. And so we're going to hear from a few people who cover that today. All right, so I get the pleasure and privilege of introducing our panel for today. So firstly, we have Victoria Palmer, who is Professor of Co-Design and Primary Care Mental Health and a Co-Director of the Alive National Centre. And next we have Priscilla Ennals, and Priscilla is an occupational therapist and researcher at Nehemiah National, who is a partner of the Alive National Centre. And Mark Loughhead is a lecturer of lived experience in mental health with the Mental Health Suicide Prevention Research and Education Group at the University of South Australia. And Mark is a collaborator within the Live National Centre. And then we've next got Phil Orcher, who I'm going to pronounce this wrong, Phil. I'm so sorry. Phil is a Maori. Do you want to say that for me? I'm so sorry.
Murawari, Amy. Murawari Gumbangi.
Beautiful. Thank you. And the Aboriginal Co-Design Lead at the Alive National Centre. And next we have Ingrid Hatfield, and she has 10 years of experience in social policy and advocacy at the national level, most recently leading the development of Mental Health Australia's policy team to influence mental health reform. And Mental Health Australia is a partner of the Alive National Centre. Next up, we've got Ali Haney, and she is the co-lead of the Co-Design Living Labs and representative for the Next Gen Research Network, And she describes herself as human, and with sharing her very human experiences of having lived and living with a collection of mental illnesses and complex trauma in hope of creating change for other humans. And I think she's one of the very best humans. And we've got Julia Palfreyman today as well, and she is a co-design and lived experience researcher and co-lead at the Alive National Centre. And she joined the network as a co-designer and qualitative research assistant and in 2024 was awarded the Alex McLeod Training Award. And then last not least, and in a different time zone for us, we've got Nev Jones, who is a community engaged mental health services researcher with an interdisciplinary academic background in social and political philosophy. And as I said, Nev is based in the University of Pittsburgh in the United States. So thank you for joining us today, Nev. Okay, so this is just, we're going to ask questions on Slido. Feel free to use the link or use the QR code and just ask your questions in there. And so now I will hand over to Vicky and Priscilla, who have their own slides, and to get us started. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Amy. What an awesome way to take off and get started into the discussion that we've been holding annually since I think the centre started in 2022 was our first one, Dana. You'll have to correct me if I've got that wrong. But, you know, Priscilla, I thought, well, that just covers the totality of partnerships, doesn't it? You know, really just the panel mix and everything that goes into the event. Is there anything you'd like to add in introducing yourself before I share our slides, Priscilla?
Yeah, thanks, Vicky. And thanks for having us as part of this panel. I guess I'm thinking about my role in partnering from a couple of angles, I suppose. I'm a partner of Alive through my involvement with Nehemiah National, which is an NGO. So sometimes I'm coordinating partnerships, and sometimes I'm being in the role of a partner being asked onto research projects. So I'll speak from a couple of those angles.
Wonderful. Thanks, Priscilla. And I got us a couple of little slides to just give people a bit of context on the totality of partnerships in the National Centre just before we kick off, because we've got a bit of an idea around holding the conversation around the whole concept of the word partnership. So we've come up with a couple of words that we think are helpful for guiding us in that conversation today. And one of the key things, I suppose, that we've been able to develop over time in the Alive National Centre is what Amy was talking about as our action to the core, casting the net for what matters. And it's also work that's now been funded and moves into the future of Alive National's work up until 2030. And I think it's one of the great representations of building on partnerships, growing partnerships, and showing how you can form what we might understand as a nexus, which I always say is a series of interconnected parts. And the National Centre's role is really around forming those parts and being part of the connector between a series of parts and enabling spaces and places to hold what's important to them in the process. So one of the things that I really wanted to, I suppose, lead with and acknowledge the input of Tyson Younger-Porter and Phil here is the way that we approach partnership in the National Centre, just to contextualise that within the conversation, and how important it is for us to really think about being in right relation. And a lot of people may or may not be familiar with that term, but it's really about understanding when we're entering into a partnership or a way of working together, what the right protocols might be. And that operates at all levels, understanding with Priscilla how we might work with Nimi, to working out in communities and really understanding who we should be speaking with first and how we should be approaching things. So I really wanted to just highlight this is an important process for us and an important way of working. Thinking about protocol, thinking about the processes, thinking about values and the systems that already exist before we go in and then say, oh, this is what we could be doing together. And a lot of people sort of feel like they approach partnerships in that way. But I think, what you'll hear from the panel today are various reflections on how well that might be achieved, depending on where you're coming from and speaking from. And so I suppose I didn't really announce who I was. I expect most people to know that I'm one of the co-directors, but my background has been in community development and working in family violence before I finished my PhD way back now. It's getting to 2007, so it's starting to feel like a long time ago. But I've been working in the space of community-based work for a long time and working from the bottom up. And one of the things with the beautiful artwork that Amy was highlighting is that it's called Healing from the Ground. And it was really done for the centre to signify how we work from the ground up. So it's one of those things about trying to embed partnership from way within. And I wanted to just highlight the scale of partnerships in the National Centre and in our work. And we couldn't do it without all of the various partners that we have. Priscilla's here today talking from the Nimi national point of view, but we have a range of partners that we've grown over time. And so is Ingrid here from Mental Health Australia, to new partnerships that form and grow as we start to address different questions and form what we call this nexus. So just a little highlight of the scale of work that is underway and the importance of working collaboratively in this process. And I suppose here is that, Amy, you covered off a little bit about the nature of different kinds of partnerships, but thinking of those at multi-levels is important. And I think it's a helpful way in our careers to think about the different ways and different agendas, different values people might be bringing to partnerships. And, that might be working with co-designers. We've got Ali and Julia here talking from that perspective. Researchers across partnerships. We've got Mark here talking about that. And we've got communities to establish priorities. And we're all engaged in all of these different levels and services and service settings. So just to give us that little bit of context. And in the context of funding itself, there's a myriad of ways that's achieved. And some of those are specific funding schemes through what's called the Australian Research Council, or the National Health and Medical Research Council, or the Medical Research Future Fund. And all of these either have an expectation for partnerships to be established within the grant proposals, and or they're specifically focused on partnership approaches. So there's a variety of ways in which partnership work is funded and supported. But I think you'll hear a bit today around those questions that some of the Next Generation Researcher Network members have sent through, Priscilla, of how do you do partnerships if you don't have funding? And how critical is it, and how do I form them? And there are lots and lots of different aspects to be thinking about in the process. So the way that we thought we'd operate that conversation and to think about it is to just use the word partnerships itself and to run through. I won't keep this up on the screen, everyone, don't worry. It's a little bit of a boring slide to be looking at for the whole panel. But the panel are going to speak to different parts of this word partnerships and all of the words that we've attached to them that have come up in different work. And here we might be thinking about researchers and also what you had suggested before, Priscilla, around responsibilities as well in the process. So I think in all of that, what that leads us into is a very interesting little tour through the whole concept of partnerships. And we've got some questions that people have sent through that we've allocated to some of the words and some of the panellists. You've been invited to put questions into Slido and or pop them in the chat. We're hoping that this is sort of a dialogue approach. So we do want the people who are in the room here to ask those questions and to feel a part of the conversation. So please do add any of your prompts and thoughts as you're going along, and then we can help to co-create the guidebook around this conversation going forward. So I think in all of that, Priscilla, you may be one of my first questions that I'm meant to be directing at. And I think what we wanted to start with here was to say that, you know, ultimately partnerships are about people. They're about working together. They're about communities. If we talk about community-led change and community-led approaches, there's no real way to achieve that and implement what matters most for people without partnerships. So I think it's important to reflect on those different kinds of partnerships in the research context, and also think about partnering with organisations. So Priscilla, I reckon it's nice for you to start off here with a little bit about your tips on planning partnerships in terms of when a researcher has their own interests and your experience of that in a research org and or in the service org.
Yeah. So maybe I'll start from thinking about as a service organisation where I'm a researcher, so I'm sometimes planning projects. So I think it's important to get the right people involved at the right time so that it can shape thinking, ideally from the start. That's not always possible because ideas need to come, they need to start from somewhere. But I always try and think about if I've got ideas that I want to push forward, it's how do I hold those ideas quite lightly so that they can be shaped from, you know, the other perspectives that I'm trying to bring into the project. Yeah, for me, genuine partnering is about a willingness to be open to new ideas and to have my ideas changed or my organisation's ideas challenged. So it's about bringing in people who are going to who might be vision or values aligned, but it might also be looking for people who are really different, who are going to bring a really different and challenging perspective in, so that we don't just, you know, keep thinking the same old thoughts and doing the same old things. Yeah. But if I'm being asked to partner, I think about, well, what's the benefits that going to be? But also I have a little, I don't know, sensing, is this tokenistic, or what do they want me involved for? What's this all about? What so I'm sort of, I don't know, have a little monitor for, is this authentic or inauthentic? Because there's so many things to weigh up as a provider, organisation agreeing to partner. So we're thinking about, you know, do people who we support want this? Like, is it relevant to them? Is it meaningful? I'm always wondering, is it possible? Like, is it in real life? Is you know, testing this thing out possible? A funder's going to allow it. My leader's going to allow it. All that sort of stuff. I'm wondering about what sort of impact it's going to have on staff time and how that's going to play out. Is it sustainable, or is it just going to be a sort of a drop in the ocean and then it's going to disappear and maybe some positive benefits will also disappear. And so I think about those sort of things. And of course, I think about, are these good people? Are they people I want to work with and spend time with? So are they open? Are they willing to learn? Are they going to listen to the perspectives that people who are connected with NEMI might bring to a project? So all that's going on in these decisions about partnering.
Yeah, quite a lot. And I think in researcher enthusiasm, it is easy to forget, and knowing this from, you know, having had a 16-year career of growing partnerships, it is easy to forget that partners are trying to meet their own goals and values in all of the mix. So I think that having agency was our second word there, and thinking about how do we sort of honour the agency of partners within partnerships, because we end up writing a grant and we have all of these deliverables and all those things. It's really, really tricky. So I thought here, Ingrid, you might be able to reflect a little bit on some of the partnerships or some of the ways you've managed that being in a peak with Mental Health Australia. Some people might not be as familiar with Mental Health Australia, if you want to just say a few words about that too. And just give us a little sense how you're balancing all of those needs and values, but then your own organisational values, and then having agency in a partnership context.
Thank you so much, Vicky. And yeah, thanks for having me as part of this amazing panel. As Vicky said, I work for Mental Health Australia, which is the peak body that represents the full spectrum of mental health services in Australia. That covers both professional service providers, researchers, lived experience representative organisations. And we try to bring together that diversity of perspectives into unified goals to advocate mainly to Commonwealth, to Australian government. And as part of my role here, I've been privileged to manage some of these research partnerships. I think there can often be a tension between an ideal approach for research and an ideal approach for policy and advocacy. And so acknowledging the agency and the goals of a partner organisation from the get-go is really important. And I think in my experience, it's been difficult when you don't have that shared goal from the start. That's where things can get challenging. And so being really specific and clear about what's a shared outcome that we want to achieve through this. It could simply be we want to progress research in this area and find something out. For as a policy person and an advocate, what we often want is to be able to say at the end of this, we found this, and so governments should do that. If you can say it, we're aiming for one sentence that we can say that integrating peer workers was found to improve the outcomes of the service, and so governments should do it more, and here's some things to consider, like to get to that very clear, that's what we want to be able to say. There's a lot of nuance that needs to go into the planning of research to get to be able to say that thing, and many changes that can come along the way. So I think practically how I found useful in managing that is having somebody within the organisation from our side as a partner who understands enough of research that we can have that conversation in a shared way as we go. So, for example, we were doing research about mapping availability of mental health services. We were using a particular data set, and it came out with some really wacky results that we hadn't expected. And so we sat down with a researcher and had a conversation. This is really different to other research or evidence that we know about. What might be the limitations of that data set? And together worked out a different methodology and data that was more aligned with the policy that we wanted to say, but was also still robust from a research perspective. So having enough of an understanding that we could have that conversation, and also the researcher having some awareness of the kind of broader political and policy environment that we're trying to speak into, so you can have enough of a shared conversation and make those decisions as, of course, things change along the way. Thanks.
Thanks, Ingrid. So you're really picking up on this, the tension between the researcher priorities versus, you know, provider or organisation or community priorities. There's often a bit of tension there. So I might go to Ali now. I don't know, Ali, from your perspective, what's it been like for you to partner with a large research organisation like Alive?
Hi everyone. Thank you for being here. Oh no. Oh yeah, I'm happy to be here. Sorry. Yeah, well, okay, from my perspective, this is not my world. And I don't claim that it is my world and has ever been my world. So it's like this big like crazy world. But then I suppose too, if someone was to step into my world and walked a bit in my world, they'd be like far out. Like, so, you know, there's that. But I stumbled into this world and I was offered a seat at the table. And in the beginning, that seat looked like surveys that I would just fill out. And then something happened and the seat like turned into co-design projects that I felt really aligned with what I'm interested in, because it's like, wow, we're working with other organizations and hopefully all my like shitty experiences are going to be like hopefully be able to be put into this work to have better outcomes for other people, so they don't have to have that guilt, that shame, and all of that. So that's why I do it. But now the seat has changed again, but also I have a place. So not only do I have a seat at the table, but I have my own place at the table. So I get to do things like this. So I bring like, so it may be over the top, it may be whatever, but that's who I am. And that comes with my experience and my perspective. So I have a bit more freedom, maybe, to be a bit more like, with stuff, but I think that's the most important thing, is that seat is now a place, and it's my place to do what I can with until the next person, till I'm done, and the next person can come on and do that themselves. And it's also about choices. Having a place means that for the first time in my life, in a partnership, which this is my longest consistently running partnership, I actually have choices and I have a voice. So it's all very exciting.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Ellie.
No worries. Thank you.
You've got a couple of comments there, Ali, about your shiny background and earrings there. So they're livening up the
Thanks.
chat.
I love a theme.
Yeah.
So like, and this is how I feel like I really bring it. Give me a theme, I will run. I will run with that and I will try to make it mine. Thank you.
Thanks, Ali. And I think you touched there on this as your longest partnership, and it does speak to that number T of in the word partner of time, and it has been something that we've been able to grow over time, which is a real exploration of understanding what matters for different people and communities. And I think that's been a really important aspect of work. It's also interesting when Ingrid was speaking about getting that one single message, that's also based on research and activities that have probably happened over a long time too, Ingrid. And it's that real challenge of how do you get that preciseness of what governments are looking for the ask, but then honour all of the relationships that might have gone before. And so, Mark, I thought I might just ask you a little bit of a question here around time from your point of view. Do you start forming partnerships yourself before receiving funding, and when do you start? And, early career researchers are always trying to work out when do I have to have a big grant beforehand, so on and so forth. So welcome and thank you.
Thanks, Vicky, and hi, hello, everyone. I've probably got about 4 points, I think, responding, and I think it's really around, say, because the question's framed as an early career researcher. So what do you bring, to your researcher identity, and what do you want that to be, and what are you passionate about that way? And if we're thinking sort of around lived experience, how does that passion connect? Ally you with certain movements or groups, or align you with those interests that way? Or are you already part of a community where you can contribute back? Because I see sort of researchers needing to contribute back and have practical outcomes for people and communities. So it's also about your commitment of what you're prepared to bring and what you bring over time that way. And if you're a whole person and connecting that way, then because we sort of know that sort of sense of researchers dropping into spaces for meeting their interests, and a partnership's not that at all. Partnership's about a sort of a long, program of development and shared interests. And also actually a partnership is a sort of external to both sets or three sets of interests. It's a shared ground like we mentioned before. So yeah, that's all really important around how you can sort of contribute. And the other point is, like, how do people know what those interests are that you have? Like, how do you have a profile around that, and how is that known and shared and communicated? And some of that's sort of your informal work, not just sort of formal in your research role. It's about, who you are and the relationships that you might build over time that way. Another point I had is, when you're working up a grant or developing ideas with people, sometimes, a lot of times that's not successful, but it's all still valuable. So your history of learning and working and talking together is really valuable, and keep building on that over time and see how it can be used in other ways. Are we sort of seeing early career researchers in an isolated way rather than seeing them as part of teams and organisations? And if so, what does the team help you? So in my role, a lot of what I do is sort of a part of a team. It's not me acting independently. And in partnerships with consumer groups, it's about that shared approach. So what opportunities come from those collective conversations and the skills and capabilities of other people that can be shared with you that way. And just the sort of last point is, we all sort of benefit from reading different types of partnerships and arrangements, especially in lived experience spaces where, if you're in a university, that might not be the centre of the research. You might be sort of resourcing and supporting research based within the community group where, it's a co sort of research approach, and you're a resource person and contributor for that. So it is, I think we're going to talk about another question about what you bring as an emerging researcher. And probably the last point just is around your sort of methodologies and style and how you align with advocacy and movements, because I think being clear on that sort of area is really important in mental health research, because it's always about sort of change and shifting services and systems which don't always work well for people. So, there's a big agenda for change. There's a lot of strong advocacy happening and required. So often your research is going to inform or connect with that. And so being clear around that and sort of how to manage all the ethics processes and setting up your partnerships and what you contribute as a researcher is really important. That might be it for me.
Great, thanks, Mark. Yeah, really, I so relate to that idea of, I don't know, putting out so many different threads and thinking about them as building relationships which are foundations to maybe lots of different future partnerships. So that you've got a starting point. The next word we had was negotiation. So of course, in all partnership work, there's lots of things to be negotiated. So hoping to throw to you now, Nev, and really, really grateful that you're chiming in from the States very late at night. So I don't know, from your perspective, who makes a good partner, and how do you negotiate some of those things, and maybe even what things are important to negotiate from your perspective?
Yeah, well, thanks, Priscilla. And it's actually lovely to be among Australians, a little bit of a respite from just the US right now, where things are really quite dreadful, as I'm sure you all know. So I think this is a question that and a topic and a challenge that I think about a lot. And I think particularly for people who publicly identify as having lived experience, or really honestly an identity in any other minoritized group within the setting in question. There's this kind of perpetual risk of being tokenized, of being offered partnership collaboration ostensibly that is really because the group or the investigator in question either needs to check a box in terms of funders, they're somebody with lived experience or somebody from a particular socially marginalized positionality needs to be involved. Or they have sort of internalized that, right? To sort of project, perform being a good researcher. I need to have a co-author with lived experience, or I need to tack them onto a grant. But it's not because they want to be challenged to think differently. It's not because they want to change the way that they're thinking about the work that they do or the topic in question for the grant. So I would say be wary when that isn't the motivation. The motivation really should be, I want to be challenged to think differently, to think more deeply. I understand that they're deeply understand and grasp that there are huge disjunctures between the perspectives of many folks on the receiving end of these services, right? Or who have lived experience, and that we need to bridge that somehow, that we need to change the way we're doing things, rethink the way that we're doing things. And if that is not what the investigator or the group is bringing to the table, that's really problematic. And the other thing I would say is that, be especially wary when somebody in another region, another part of the country, or a different country entirely is coming to you, which I think kind of over time I have realized is often because their reputation locally is already so terrible, or they have already come under strong critique from local advocates and activists. And so they're trying to find the people to, fill out their grant proposal from farther away. And I think that it can feel at first especially flattering, because it's like, oh, somebody from a whole nother country, especially if you're early career, wants to work with me, wants to include me on their grant application. But it's not only that they're doing kind of harm to you, but that if you agree and participate, there's a whole complicated ethics of what that might be doing to local activists, advocates who are trying to either fight or force to compete with this more disingenuous, but quite often probably powerful type partner. So yeah, so sort of wariness of all those things. And I think, can't remember who, but somebody said earlier, right? Maybe it was even you, Priscilla, that you just developed this sort of gut gut sense of like, does this feel authentic? Does this feel real? Or does this feel performative and it's being done for the wrong reasons? And I think the more that you can, in your early career, it's harder to trust those instincts. But learning to trust yourself, if it feels like this doesn't feel right to me, this doesn't feel like it's really being done for the right reasons, or very quickly you have a couple of meetings and pick up on that, like learn to trust yourself. And if it doesn't feel right, it probably is not something that is really in your best interest. And then last thing would just be like, there are really good people out there, right? And many in the Alive network. Find the good people, find the people who are doing this for the right reasons, and sort of like stick to them, work with them. Yeah, so thank you guys.
Yeah, fantastic, Nev. Someone's just asked a question. How do you navigate when you feel that the partnership is imbalanced or unequal? Have you had that?
Yeah, so many times. Story of my life. It is really challenging. It's really challenging. And sometimes I will say the thing that I do badly is that I tolerate it partly it's sort of an internalized gaslighting. It's like, I'm maybe misreading the person, and you keep telling yourself, maybe I misinterpreted that. And then things get to a point where it's really, really bad, and you are now furious, or members of your team are being mistreated. And, then I have a tendency to get like really angry, actually, and, really put down my foot. But I've waited way too long. So I think, if you have the same sort of predisposition, which is maybe not the best, trying to assert yourself in a partnership or a collaboration that seems to be going down the wrong path as soon as possible. Or the other thing is, if you just sometimes, when I can, I will involve other people from my team who are simply more assertive in a more kind of proactive early way. So like, if you just know yourself and you're like, I'm not good at this. I'm not good at sort of standing up early because I always think it must be really me until it's too late. Other people who can intervene proactively, and just in general too, if you're alone in a partnership, that sort of internalized gaslighting, I must just be misinterpreting things. It's a lot easier to convince yourself of that if you have at least another person with lived experience there, right? You can kind of temperature check with them. Was I like did you pick up on the same things? Did that seem really problematic? And that's really helpful in kind of bolstering your own confidence and your ability to potentially, say something, speak out, speak up earlier. And I think that the other thing I would say is, it is often actually the best thing to just withdraw, not necessarily, burn down all the bridges, but to just remove yourself from situations that are not really in your best interest. Just get out of there. You don't have to make enemies with people. You could come up with a face-saving sort of excuse. I've just gotten way too busy. Oh, I just, got offered this other role and I'm not going to have time. So you can kind of remove yourself without necessarily burning those bridges, but often, although you might tell yourself, maybe it'll get better, maybe I'll still get something out of this. This is a famous person, usually you don't. If they're using you, they're using you at the end of the day for their own purposes. And if you can just extract yourself from it, that's better.
Yeah. Great advice, Nev. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
We might just put a question out to the whole audience now, and you might want to use the chat function to add some comments. But how do you decide who you're going to work with? Yeah, so let's collect some collective wisdom through the chat.
Yeah, great question there, Priscilla, for everyone to ponder on. And I think you're speaking very much to that, Nev, of how do you decide, how do you know all of those elements? And I noticed another comment in the chat about sustaining partnerships and the time and funding to do that. And I suppose another reflection is around that some methods and some ways of working just cannot be done without being in partnership, and so it becomes the whole of what we do. It's not separated from the actions that we're taking as researchers. It's part of the whole piece and the whole picture, and therefore it's part of the time we're investing in the work. It's part of the steps towards funding and building that in, and I think that's an important thing to think about, a bit like Mark's point around teams, that we're not necessarily solo in a grant, we're part of a team, and thinking about in research, we're not necessarily sitting over here trying to find the answer. We have to do it in partnership, particularly when we're talking about translating research and working with partners to change things from the ground up. So Phil, I think this one sort of leads into that importance of engagement along the way, and thinking about the importance of engagement with partners. And you might like to speak from your own perspective here of, what's a couple of tips on approaching partnerships and engaging, particularly from your perspective of mob, I suppose.
Well, thanks, Vicky. I was trying to work out what letter I was in that acronym, to tell you the truth, in the beginning, but there was so much wisdom coming from everybody prior to my chat just now. Oh, yeah, just now. And, I guess you could call myself an early career researcher as well, Vicky, and um, an early career engagement officer in research, and not to mention an early career researcher in engagement, add Aboriginal community into that mix as well, because um, research has a somewhat negative legacy within community from the time of colonization, all these types of things. So as soon as myself mentions that I'm a part of a university system and all these types of things, a lot of the times I get the glazed over looked. Oh, what's this engagement about? And what's in it for these fellas and all these types of things. A lot of the challenge for us as a centre and myself as a Aboriginal man, it was about making sure that we could make communities and make organisations and community control spaces be aware that we're bringing back the benefit to community. And that's one of the balancing things that we need to figure out before we even go out onto country and all these types of things, because sometimes we can approach the wrong communities, and that's for the research topic at hand, and they're not the right people, and that might hurt our spirit a little bit, and the ego might be sort of bruised a little bit, and lose faith in yourself, and all those types of things. So you got to be acutely aware of the communities that you're going to, the the benefit to that community for that engagement and being a part of your grants and all these types of things. But I wanted to get back to one of those things where it's a bit like a chicken and egg sort of thing with the Aboriginal community as well, because the tokenism comes with that engagement where you need to have a relational sort of approach from the get-go with community, and you sort of need to touch base with all the communities across the state and nations before you even have a topic, just to say hello, you know, hello, Phillip Orcher. Just introduce yourself, introduce who you are. A lot of us, I can't remember who mentioned it in the panel around identify yourself as an early career researcher. Yes, that's fine. People are forgiving for that because you might be learning along the way, but at the same time, they would really love to just know who you are. You know, they get a good sense of work, that partnership and the longevity of the partnership goes a long way when they realize who they're actually working with. Does he have kids? Does he have a family? Who's his family connected to? What's this research all about? It all gets thrown into the mix of understanding of your research area when you're engaging with Aboriginal communities, and it comes back to the benefit for the community as well. So I'm not sure if that answers the question around it all, because it's a big melting pot of a whole lot of little ingredients that come into play that everybody's mentioning. There's some creative minds that put this panel together, so there's a lot of notes being taken in the background, I'm sure. But I reckon one of the main components is being acutely aware of those elements that Vicky had showcased in regards to Tyson Yunkaporta's approach to working with community, and that's using those systems, protocols, and values, and all these types of things. And they will be different in different communities across that big map that Vicky had shown around the people that we have engaged with in our partnerships and all these types of things. And they're all different types of processes and protocols that we all have to adapt to at each different site. So be aware of that not one size fits all, and factor that into your approach as well, to be flexible and all these types of things too.
Yeah, and I think they feel too, just before you go to you, Priscilla, for segueing us again, is that coming back to the starting letter of people, that it is about learning to share who you are, not what you are, first and foremost. And that's something that I've had the joy of being able to learn more from working together as well, Phil. So over to you, Priscilla, which has helped me to be ready for partnering, Priscilla.
Totally. So yeah, readiness for partnering. Yeah, what's that all about? But maybe Ingrid, you could tell us a bit about, from your perspective, have you gone about I don't know, finding partnerships or joining existing partnerships, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think we're talking about partnerships. I love the way that Mark talked about shared ground. And I think there can be so many different ways of doing partnerships. And so it can be as simple as somebody coming to us and saying, look, we've got this whole methodology worked out already. We've got this whole process going. Can you just support this, please? We've drafted you the template letter, sign on the dotted line. We consider it like, yeah, that sounds like something we can put our name against, happy to support you. And that's maybe not a partnership, but it is a support. Or it can be down the like full other end of the spectrum about, hey, we've got this vision that we want to work across over the next 5 years. Is this something your organization could be a part of? And you're really starting from the ground up of working through from the start, what's the methodology that we want, who else do we want to be involved, and like really working together. So I think there are heaps of different ways that can look like and everything in between. And I think it's also thinking about what do you want in terms of the long term, who do you want to be able to influence at the end of the research. And so often there can be researchers coming saying, we've got this vision, we're working with these communities, and we just want some other people in like a steering committee or to be involved in a little bit of ways so they're familiar with the research as it goes, and then can kind of be ambassadors for it at the other side. And that's, I guess, for a policy advocacy perspective, that's often where we come in of kind of being aware of the research and then also being able to kind of steward it towards implementation. So I feel like, I guess that was the other perspective to just say that partnerships can look like so many different things and often are different depending on the roles of organizations and the capacity. I love what people were saying in the chat about having shared values and alignment and shared goals, and that's kind of fundamental to partnership. But then within that, who's got the capacity for different stages for what you need? Yep.
Definitely, Ingrid, and that capacity for all the different stages is thinking about how we also keep ourselves safe in research. And I guess that happens at multiple levels, Priscilla, where you were talking about in the beginning, balancing what does the service need? What do people who are accessing services need? How is this meeting the priorities of people most impacted? And all of those elements. And I suppose sometimes we don't think on all fronts about safety. Like we're tending to think about it a bit, what I was putting in the chat there of that transactional one-way approach, whereas it's multi-directional and needing to be accounted for. So I thought I would ask you, Mark, around creating a bit of safety in terms of balancing work, tasks, budget, time. These have all sort of been touched on. But thinking about approaching partnerships in a safe way from your point of view.
Hey, I think a bit of it is in, I guess, in terms of your partnerships around negotiating. Say if you're negotiating a project, what it looks like. I mean, you're in the partnership, you're designing that, you're writing that project up. And so I think that, there's things around the safety of the language as well as the processes that you're going to do together, as well as, solid ground on why you want to do that and what you're going to do with the findings, whether they're going to be meaningful and relevant and valuable for the people that you're working with, or the service and the lived experience communities around the service. So a lot of it has got to do with design and your sort of ethics base and knowing that out front, because if you put it out front, then you can shape and control that in times when there's, might be the larger environments of the university where you're feeling uncertain about things, or you need to protect the project and get what you need to get out of it, make it work. So sort of safety is about, part of it's about design and having time to work through those things and structuring. Say if you're doing a project that has advisory groups or advisors and, it's got a collective behind it, it's like making sure you've got good time with that collective to talk through those things, because often you know, say with where it's a co-process, you've got a lot of wisdom around the table, and you can sort of identify those things in advance and make decisions. And making collective decisions to guide your project is often the sort of a good way of sort of promoting that safety. The other thing is like transparency around your sort of limits and your scope, and just, you know, talking about that, being transparent, helping people understand what you can and can't do, I think. And, you know, and so in terms of that, giving things back, how do you design your project so that there's building capacity and there's sort of flows that go to people who are contributing, you know, lots of different benefits and spin-offs that can happen around building skills in meetings, or researcher skills, or co-authorship skills. Yeah, so they all help that process. And taking notice of messages in lived experience about that topic area, and how all the different nuances and ways it can be seen is really important, because that helps us understand that, yeah, you know, topics and issues are multidimensional and have different ways of being understood by different people. And I think, yeah, there's a sense of safe enough that can emerge from knowing all of that and talking about all of that. So that's some ideas. It's probably not so much about budget and time. It's better to do less and focus and have a layered quality approach, rather than trying to spread yourself too, you know, from a research point of view, spread yourself too thin.
Thanks, Mark. So much in, yeah, it's a lot of nuance in safe enough, isn't there? Yeah. But I was just having that spreading yourself too thin conversation with someone this morning, and yeah, I so believe it's better to, you know, have a smaller focus and do it well than trying to do too much.
Yeah, don't do it if you can't do it well.
Yeah.
All right, delete the slide on the map.
Yeah, Vicky, you're very good at just keeping it small, I've noticed. So the next letter we had was H, for harmonious relationships. And this is an interesting one, because what's a harmonious relationship from different perspectives? Yeah, raised a lot of questions for me. But someone on the Slido asked, and maybe we can put this out to anyone on the panel, what do you think about how to rebuild reputation, especially when with communities and people with lived experience, if a partnership ends up in a wrong move? So it's such a good question. So I don't know if anyone wants to jump in and have a view on that.
Priscilla, can you repeat the question?
How do you go about rebuilding reputation, especially with communities or people with lived experience, if a partnership has ended up in a wrong move? So it's about how do you do the repair work to if something hasn't worked out so well.
I'll go back to time. You got to give it time. Ali, go for it.
Yeah, sometimes maybe just realizing there is no repair. Like, you know, like okay, so I run on feeling. I like to read stuff, engage feeling and everything. And, you know, it's all about feeling for me. And because of my lived experience with different types of abuses, like, and not really knowing harmony, like, what is harmony? What does that look like? I cannot honestly tell you. So for me, sometimes that feeling, and it may take a little bit of time, because there is, as someone mentioned before, like that gaslighting that you do to yourself. But for me, if something doesn't feel right, there's only so long I can go along with it for, until I get to that point where it's like, nah, and I can either shut down and totally blow up bridges, or if I'm in a safe place where the partnership feels safe, then maybe I can speak up. Like, you know, but I also have that abuse from other workplaces where I know I'm at the bottom of the food chain, regardless of my position that I may hold or anything like that. But at the end of the day, I'm at the bottom of the food chain. So, like, sometimes when you reach that point, you may try, but sometimes I feel, for me, and that may be my flight and fright and all of that, it's just best to throw your hands up and go, no, what have I learned from this, and how can I put this better, like, and learn from it, so when I do go into a next partnership and something starts to go south, I'm not blowing myself up. I'm not doing that to myself.
Yeah, Ali, and when, like, that stepping away side of things, I think is really an important point there.
Yeah.
Because the question here is about rebuilding reputation, which sort of sounds a little bit like it's coming from one side. Again, if something's gone south and people want to repair.
Yeah.
But is it on both sides? And I wonder
Yeah.
if you've had that, Nev, in any of yours with, you know, you've had a massive, obviously impact with change of government on funding. There's a whole range of things. Repair there, unlikely. You don't have the shared values with the people in power, so to speak. So I wondered if you wanted to make any comment there as well.
Oh boy, yeah. Yeah, I think except I think people in the state, researchers in the States right now are just completely, it's like the carpet has just been pulled from under us in every possible way. And I think everybody's trying to figure out how to respond to the Trump administration and what ethical practice like do you play everybody plays the game, right? One talks about kind of playing the game and applying for grants, but do you play the game when when the game master is Trump? Or I think everybody's in a state of kind of existential crisis to some degree, at least here around that. But I really resonate with kind of what you were both discussing, Ali, Vicky, is just sometimes the best thing is not trying to sort of flog the dead horse. Something really hasn't worked. There has been relational injury and both time and not trying to fix it, right? Sometimes it's just letting it go, letting it be what it is sort of what makes the most sense. And maybe, I don't know, I can't even like begin to really respond to what we should all be doing in the US, but I think maybe some of it is precisely that it will be clear to us with time, and that trying to overthink what to do now isn't going to get us anywhere, but we just have to kind of see what unfolds, and maybe a clear ethical sensibility or kind of crystallization emerges with a bit more time when one's not in this state of sort of just feeling shocked, which could be any relationship gone wrong.
Yeah, that difference between reactivity and responsiveness, Priscilla, which is in partnerships where you got to just sometimes allow that bit of time for responding rather than reacting to different situations. And I'll segue us back into an important concept in relation to this too, I think, that does relate to the question you've put to the panel, Priscilla, but keeps us just getting towards the end of partnership as the word, so that we could have an open floor a bit more as well, of thinking about integrity. Because of course that question that's been asked there is partly about how do you demonstrate integrity, how do you ensure you've got integrity in your work and your partnerships and ways of working. And I thought this one here is for you, Julia, just to have a bit of perspective on what lived experience research from your point of view as a co-designer adds into the research partnerships in all of those approaches.
Well, thanks, Vicky. I actually prepared a little reflective piece that it may touch on integrity. I actually hope it does, because it's an important thing for me. But it was more about, I think the question I thought was a focus was what my lived experience voice brought to the research partnership. So I'm hoping that's still helpful. We shall see. It's just a little bit of a philosophical reflection that's not too long. So in terms of what do I feel my voice adds to the research partnership, and excuse the rooster in the background. He's been very quiet, but he's suddenly, obviously I'm talking, so I've got him going. All right. So look, my initial response to this question was not much. I'm not sure my voice adds a great deal to research partnerships at this stage. Perhaps I offer fresh perspectives or new ways of seeing and an enthusiasm for the possibilities of growth. Perhaps I'm a cheerleader of sorts. Keep going. I think in general, lived experience researchers have often thought deeply about some of the conditions that they experience. And even if their conditions can't be relieved, they may gain acceptance and insight through the work they do in understanding them. And in practical terms, a degree of emotional wisdom, authentic listening, and a quickness in reading the room can be an asset to any research partnership. Picking up hidden roadblocks, nuanced shifts in mood. In qualitative research, particularly complex interviewing, I have found this lived experience and awareness has often made for deep, trusting and valuable discussions that can be directly used to impact program outcomes. And most certainly my obsessionality is helpful in uncovering patterns in analytical work. Rodin, I think the sculptor, is loosely quoted as saying he didn't create, rather he uncovered the shapes that already lay deep in the clay. And I do, on occasion, when I don't have brain fog, do feel some delight when patterns emerge in front of my eyes when I look at a sea of data. My neurodiversity and my particular brand of ADHD, or neurospiciness, as the young kids like to call it, brings with it an allergy of all things fixed and linear. And in a team of research partners who are united in their shared passion for redressing structural inequalities, this flexibility of thought or upside-down thinking can create new pathways, perhaps create energy around what may be possible. If I speak of having lived experience of mental ill health, or as I prefer to call it, mental injury, particularly with complex trauma, whilst I appreciate that trauma is something that happens within us, I'm more interested in the idea that we are born whole. And if the system does not adequately support us emotionally or physically or keep us safe, this will result in a disrupted sense of self, of harm, particularly amongst those of us who are not born to follow what seems intuitively unfair and unnatural. It is much easier for a system to put a label on us as disordered than to consider we may be simply reflecting it back to itself. I'm fond of quoting Sana Ahsan, who is a UK clinical psychologist working in the NHS, who puts it succinctly here. If a plant were wilting, we wouldn't diagnose it with wilting plant syndrome. We would change its conditions. Yet when humans are suffering under unlivable conditions, we're told something is wrong with us and expected to keep pushing through, to keep working and producing without acknowledging our hurt. I am sure as I continue my journey in research partnerships as a member of this magnificent team, that my voice will shift and grow in strength. But I hope my ability to listen deeply will always be greater than anything I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. Very poignant. And I think one of the touch points there for me was around, thinking about energy and the difference that can bring in different partnerships around looking at something differently or thinking about the different patterns differently. So I really enjoyed hearing that, and particularly around the sculpting and all of the things that we do in partnerships around that. I think we're wrapping up into our final letter. I got Priscilla, it wouldn't be me if I hadn't have got the ordering wrong, but since I did the first two, I'll do the last two. So the last one, we thought about being really critical to partnerships, and particularly in the context of working across communities in what's called Australia currently, is place. And so, Phil, I was wondering if you might have a couple of final words on why place is so important in partnerships and things that you've thought about in terms of how that plays into your work.
Oh, plays into every aspect of my approach to things, Vicky, and everybody. You heard Amy earlier introduce myself as a Murawari Gumbaynggirr man, and that leads before any title that I get paid for in working with the Aboriginal community. I have to introduce myself in that regard, where they know where I'm coming from and what community I belong to, and all those types of things. And from there, mob have this wonderful mechanism where they formulate all these things together and think, oh, what's this person like, and what's he aligned with, and then following that sort of approach is how I align with the Alive Centre and how I align with the research, and how do I make sure that they're aware of the benefit for community again that I keep coming back to all the time, because it's what matters to them. We spoke about the partnerships that need to be formed with community orgs that are in community. You got to be mindful when you're talking to these community orgs, executive teams, that they're speaking on behalf of that community. They and they are always sort of doing checks and balances around the benefit to community for themselves as well, because they answer to community and the community would let them know. So you're protecting their reputation, your reputation, building in your own integrity along the way as well. So, um, as Julia mentioned earlier, around the you're uncovering what's within the clay. You gotta try and let that emerge as well as you're working towards engagement, because it's really important around making sure it matters, and that whole research, your research matters to your career progression, yes, but also what are you giving back? How are you giving back, and how does it benefit in the long run for people? And it's a slow burn. You don't know how long it's going to take. Hence the touch and base with communities that might be a priority population really early in your career, making good connections with the people that you've studied with, and all these types of things. 6 degrees of separation in an Aboriginal community is really, really relevant. Murawari Gumbaynggirr will be able to place a person's mother, father, family, nation in within 3-4 minutes. I'm sure if you've worked with Aboriginal communities before, that's how we work. And if you've known Aboriginal people in your studies or anything like that, I hope you engage with them and creating some great relations, and not knowing that it was going to benefit you in the long run moving forward in your career as well. I'm sure there's a lot of people that come to mind, but try not to reach out to them just in for the fact that they're First Nations and all these types of things. Again, you'll need to align your research with their approaches as well, because they're answering for a community. So make sure you think of all those things as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really important perspective to really close our panel conversation on. Priscilla, what do you think? Of just probably a nice way to round it off, Phil, and to think about designing in. There is a question that was sent ahead around safeguarding ideas and innovations, and I think you know, when you think about that according to place, and you think about that according to intellectual and cultural protection of, you know, rights and data sovereignty, that's material that is in the clay, as Phil is saying, and has to be designed in from the outset. And I think that, you know, that's really the way that we're trying to shift in working in partnership, is having things much more designed in from the outset to flow through, so that those things can come forward. Anything you want to add in there, Priscilla? We might hand back to Dana and Amy otherwise for some reflections, and letting the audience participants make any comments further. But is there anything you want to add, Priscilla?
No, I think it's been good conversation so far. So yeah, we'll hand it back to Amy and Dana.
Looking forward to seeing that Funding Galaxy guidebook now.
All right, thank you so much, everyone. And thank you, Glenn, for sharing that. Jamie just had to step away, so I'm just going to do this last slide. But thank you so much for all of our panelists, to Vicky and Priscilla for co-piloting. Thank you to Mark, Ingrid, Ali, Julia, Nev, and Phil. It was really valuable getting such a wide range of perspectives and some really powerful things in there that I think we can all reflect on in terms of developing partnerships, not only, as you say, for career progression, but for some really meaningful work that we can translate from research into practice as well. So thank you so much. A reminder to everyone that the 2025 funding schemes close on September 29th. They're still open for a bit over a month. So if you are keen to submit an application, there's hopefully a spot for everyone somewhere in there for pilot funding. Take a look at the NextGen website, and we'll pop the link in the chat, or we have earlier. If you want to hear more about Alive Centre updates, if you come along to the Alive National Centre Quarterly Forum on September 10th, that would be lovely, and that is only for members and partners. If you're not a member yet and you want to be a member, sign up to one of our networks on the Alive website. We will be updating the Funding Galaxy guidebook with insights from today. So keep an eye out for that, which we will send around to everyone who attended and to our network members shortly. And our next event for NextGen will be the e-networking in March 2026. So keep an eye out for that. Caroline's put a link in the chat. It would be great if you could give us a rating for today. It looks like we have finished up a little bit early. If there's anything you would like to have answered that you didn't get answered today, send us an email. And thank you again.
Sorry, Dana, just before we let everyone go, we were going to just take the slides off and let everyone maybe ask a final question if they wanted to.
Yeah, sure.
We finished up, so just before we let everyone race off, just in case people wanted to reflect on anything.
Sure.
Thank you so much. Just before you quickly wrap up that room, you're nearly there. But yeah, just an opportunity to all join together on the screen and, you know, share any reflections. You might want to put one word in the chat. You might want to ask something really poignant or not. Don't make it a hard one for us, please. But yeah, thank you. Otherwise, Dana, we will be finishing up early, of course.
It's really got me thinking today about how hard partnerships can be, but how amazing they can be. Like what actually happens when you get those diverse perspectives coming together. How what can be created as a result. I was thinking about some of my the best moments in my career are those, you know, they're often tiny moments, but it's a real connection and a real what just happened in that moment could never have happened if I was trying to do this on my own. yeah, so just reflecting on that.
Yep, absolutely. There's a lot when you driving a research agenda that it can easily be seen as in your you're in your lane going forward, but it's all of the things that sit underneath that and that we pass along the way that help to shape it too. So it's easy to forget it's all shaped by partnerships. So you have to kind of make that time for the work. I'm going to take a little like one of those screen grabby things. Do we want to bring everyone on, Dana, and let anyone who wants to come off camera do so or not? Feels a
Yeah.
bit being spotlighted for the whole thing.
One moment. All right. We'll take, oops. And 1, 2, 3. And sorry, I'm just going to do one more because, oops.
Everyone's like freeze frame. We couldn't go without Ali's backdrop getting in a pic, right?
No, that's right.
Sure.
It's I'm quite like impressed that it stayed up because it is like the budget of a grade 1 production at a small country town school.
Yep.
So I'm really impressed by it all. And thank you, Dana, for being so open to all of my creative ideas today.
Of course, so much fun, Ali.
That's what I bring. That's what I bring to this whole thing. I bring the fun and the feels and maybe the music because, I do love to sing you all a tune every now and then.
But not today.
No, no. I could do.
We could.
Have heaps lined up.
All things are possible. Let me just echo that. Thank you, Ali, for all the preparation, Dana, Amy, all the Next Generation Research Network co-leads. I know Kaylee's put a lot into it too, Dana and Jamie, even though they had to go early, and we hope Kaylee feels better soon. So without further ado, we might let everyone get their 5 minutes back. If there's no burning questions there in the chat, it is nice to round it off by seeing everyone on the screen. And there's a lot to consider, so I really will be looking forward to us digesting all of that and putting it into that Galaxy Guide and growing it in future conversations. So thank you, everyone. See you next time.
Thank you.